Hi guys, welcome back. We're Naked Security Live. I'm Alice and this is Duck.
Hello folks.
So today we're talking all about business email compromise, and that is because Portland schools were almost scammed out of, is it $2.9 million? So
yes, I think they got the money back. I don't know why we keep laughing when we talk about this, because it just sounds like a mind-boggling amount, like how could anybody fall
well,
for
we
it?
can see how it
That's what
happens,
happened.
but yeah, it's a crazy amount. So tell us what happened.
Well, this is the attack that is known as, commonly called business email compromise. You'll also hear it called CEO fraud, because the crooks want to masquerade ideally as your CFO or CEO, so CEO fraud, CFO fraud. You also hear it called whaling. It's a joke on whales are bigger than fishes. And of course, whale is slang for someone who's got an awful lot of money or controls an awful lot of purse strings. And the trick about business email compromise is it's not really to be confused with phishing, although it could start with phishing. The idea is that the crooks get inside your email system, either as you or as maybe, hopefully they're going to be, if you're a crook, you want to be the CEO, but it doesn't matter. Anybody in the accounts department will really do. So they're kind of operating as insiders.
Wow.
They watch the way your business operates. They watch the people that you're doing business and deals with. They watch invoices coming in and out for a while. And then they just start trying to vary things in a way that you pay them instead of
So it's very sophisticated.
Well, in a way, it's not technically sophisticated. So this is not really internet crime in the sense of hacking or the exploit guys in back bedrooms who are hacking away and writing viruses. These scammers, they're more like the romance scammers. They don't have to be technologically or technically gifted. They don't have to be coders. It's internet enabled crime. They know how to manipulate and use people over the internet. So you imagine if this were the 19th century, these guys would be the very same scammers who'd be trying to sell you shares in the Statue of Liberty or, would you like to buy the Brooklyn Bridge? They've got the gift of the gab. They know how to talk the talk. They know how you conduct your business, and they can weasel their way in there in a way that would get you to do things that you'd probably never believe you were capable of.
And how do they manage to get into your work email in the first place?
Typically, usually that would start with phishing. In other words, you'd click on something, you give away your password, but really that's a detail that doesn't matter. Obviously, if you protect yourself from phishing and you don't put your password into dodgy websites, then you're less likely that someone's going to take over your email account. But they could get your password in a number of ways. They could be a corrupt employee who sold their password. It could be somebody who's been casual with their password. It could be an email account that you created inside your company for a contractor who left and then you never cancelled the account. What matters is that the crooks are able to log in as you to your email account without you realizing and keep tabs on your email, so they know what you're up to, they know the way that you talk, they know the way that you sign off your emails, and most importantly, when they send an email, it actually comes from your account. So you've heard of email spoofing, which is where they make it look as though it came from you. These emails actually do come from your account, which is, it makes it much less likely that people are going to go, this is fake. It doesn't just have your name on it. If they go and look at the email headers, if they take all the technological steps to determine did the email come from you, they'd believe that it did because it did.
Sorry, so...
It's not a laughing matter, $2.9 million.
No, that's not what I'm laughing at. So we are taking your questions live, so do post them below. But Duck, with these large amounts of money, you wouldn't expect people to do it. So why is it? How are they managing to convince people to send it over?
Yeah, it does sort of beg a belief, doesn't it? You imagine that typically you think of crooks who might ask you, I want a gift card of $50, or they kind of build you up to it. But remember that this is a little bit different. They're not sending you an email saying, send me $1 million. They're sending emails that will typically reference projects that you've already got on the go. So, for example, this wasn't just our school. My understanding it was, Portland Schools, which is, that'll be the biggest schools district in all of Oregon. They've got this huge project going on, and you can imagine that it's not unusual for individual projects to have when deliverables are met, large payable amounts. Like a big, say you're building a whole new sports stadium and it's your budget is $6 million, there might be a contractor who's supposed to get $2.9 million. So it's not out of the blue. So the trick is, and I'll consult my notes here, is that if a crook can get inside your email, it's not just that the emails come from you. Firstly, they get to look through your email history. So they know the way you communicate, they know how you do this, they can talk the talk. They can keep track of the deals that they know that you're working on because they've seen the correspondence.
So it seems natural that you would be receiving that email.
Also remember that if you've got emails coming and going that are invoices and contracts and negotiations and stuff, they can make copies of documents and PDFs, so they'll have copies of official invoices, official project numbers, they'll know the names of the project managers, they know who've got the sign-off. So they can actually refer to stuff that makes it look like they're insiders because they're behaving like insiders. And most importantly, if they're inside your email, typically what they will do, either manually or by setting up email rules to do it automatically, they'll delete from sent items the stuff that they sent. So when you go and look, you won't realize that you sent an email you didn't know about. And even worse, frequently what we see when you investigate these is that people actually from outside will send back warnings saying, hey, this looks fake, are you sure? And of course, they're sending it back to you. The crooks get it first, they delete that email, you never see it. And meanwhile, they've replied and said, no, this is all in order. We really, unfortunately, have had to switch banks because of blah, blah, blah regulation or some believable reason. So they're not inventing a new project, they're not coming up with money you have to pay that isn't owing or anything like that. Typically, they're asking you to vary existing procedure. So they might be saying, the account into which these funds should be remitted has moved from this bank to that bank. The new bank code is blah, the new bank account number is so-and-so. But they're not asking you to pay a new invoice. And so it basically feels like, in the scheme of things, a minor variation. So they're not asking you to pay a bill you didn't expect, they're just asking you to follow procedure in a slightly different way, and that's where the problem
So
comes.
how do people find out that this has happened? Like with the school situation, they obviously sent the money but intercepted it before it left the account. How did that happen?
My understanding is that it was a double check before the amount was remitted, and then there was a third check because of a third cross check because of the amount involved of somebody who said no, that transaction is incorrect, and because it's going electronically through the system, they were able to intervene in time before the funds cleared the crook's account. So in other words, by checking, double checking and triple checking, they were able to actually head this one off at the pass. So the crooks are chancing it, and it is possible that even if you fall for this, that you may get the funds back, because obviously you're not sending them $2.9 million in a brown paper bag, I hope.
But are you doing it by a wire transfer?
No, in this case it will be the crooks would have. This is why they can't just do this to a million, get $10 from a million people. They will need a bank account that they've set up. So they might have used a money mule or someone that's collaborating with them in that region who's gone in with, say, fake documentation, created a bank account. They're not going to use that bank account for $10, but they can afford to take the time and spend money with other crooks to get hold of working bank accounts that were fraudulently acquired, if they're aiming for 10,000, 100,000, $1 million at a time. And typically they'll be aware, because they've been reading your email and because they'll have done their homework and because they're going after the big bucks, they can afford to take time to do their homework. They'll typically be aware of any limits that you've got. So we've seen cases where the amounts involved that were being scammed were always less than $100,000 because they knew that this particular company had a limit in the high 90s that meant that there was an extra layer of
security after that.
Security or checking that would have delayed the payment. So they can they know your rules, they know your standard procedures, and they try and bend them as little as possible so that they don't raise an alarm because it kind of all looks legit. So it sounds unbelievable that someone would sign off on $3 million, but it's not kind of signing off because the project actually exists. The crooks seem to know absolutely everything. You know, they know who's managing the project, what their phone number is, what their email address is, and they're sending it from a legitimate email account. So that's the problem. It kind of
very sophisticated.
It looks it doesn't look too good to be true, it just looks true.
Right.
And that's the problem.
So we've had a question here from Teresa. Hi Teresa, thanks for joining us. So she asks, should IT folks be advising users to change their email passwords on a regular basis? Would that have helped in this case?
The idea of regularly changing passwords that's the way we used to do it. It's a little old-fashioned, and we don't generally recommend routinely and regularly changing your passwords, because obviously if you insist on people changing their passwords, say every 3 months, then that still gives the crooks 3 months to do their business. The other problem is if you make people change their passwords too frequently, then they tend to forget their new passwords, and then you have too many people calling up IT and doing password resets, and that's a vehicle that the crooks can use to trick you. What I would recommend instead is use two-factor authentication. So you've got that second token that makes it much harder for the crooks to log in. They need to get your password, and they need that login code each and every time they want to log in. That means it's much harder for them to log in routinely at 2 a.m. every morning and check your email before you do. And that's the trick of this, is they're actually putting in a lot of time and effort into this. They're making sure that they see your email first so they can filter your view of the world, and so that they can hide the fraudulent stuff that you don't realize you've sent out. So 2FA, I think, is a much better precaution than regularly forcing people to change their passwords. Because the other problem with regularly changing your passwords is, what happens is people take the password they've got already, and then they add 01, 02, 03. So if it's March, it's 03. If it's April, it's 04, and so on and so on. So you tend to reinforce bad habits when you make rules like that. 2FA is, in my opinion, a better way to go.
So 2FA is great advice, but is there other advice you can give to people and companies to tell their staff on avoiding...
I'm going to get my notes so make sure I don't miss anything. The key thing in all of this is that because the crooks are inside your network, as we mentioned before, this is not something that sounds too good to be true. It does sound true because it comes from inside, it has the ring of authenticity. So what you need to do is kind of double up or double down on everything. And that means that don't let yourself be pushed, don't be in a hurry, and double check everything, especially if there is any variation in procedure. Not all, but the majority of business email compromise relies very much on variation. So you're going to be changing the bank account you have to pay something into. Or you might get an email from the CFO saying, oh, as you know, I'm in San Francisco this week. My phone isn't working now. I'm outside the United Kingdom. I've got a new phone number. Please update it in the record. So then everyone else who calls is calling the crook's number and not your number.
Oh, wow.
So the thing about when someone asks you to make a variation in the normal way of doing things, particularly if it includes changing things like contact details, phone numbers, passwords, or account numbers for paying, sending, or receiving funds, then double check, require a second check. And it's really important that that double check is not just perfunctory or cursory. So in other words, if you're the person, you've read this, you think, I'm going to approve this, or Duck, will you check this? For me to go through and go, okay, did you check their ID? Yes, tick, 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 tick. What I need to do is I need to go away and do all that work again myself. Yes, it adds time. Yes, it means you're a little bit less responsive. But, we've got into this habit because email and instant messaging and stuff like that is so instant that we must respond instantly as well. So, for example, I recently had to change some details for my home banking, and the bank were pretty good about it. The teller went through all the details, checked my ID and everything, and they said, now I need to check this with my supervisor. So they called over somebody else who was somewhere else in the bank, hadn't witnessed anything that I'd done with them, and that person didn't just go through the checklist that they'd gone through. That person said, hello, Mr. Ducklin, can I check your ID? And they rechecked everything, and then they verified that the two things tallied. So by getting a second opinion that isn't just someone going through a tick list to tick the same list that you ticked or checked in US terminology, but getting someone to revisit all of this stuff and making sure it all adds up. And very importantly, of course, in doubling up, that means that when you are double checking something, never rely on contact details that were in the email that you're using that was the original point of contact. Because obviously then the crooks can put in any phone number they want, any web links they want, any contact email they want. So actually use some independent method of verifying that's the case. So for example, if your CFO has suddenly said, right, we're going to need to double check stuff, here's a new phone number because my phone isn't working, it will be simple enough to call their own phone number. And if you hear it ringing in the office, you know, hang on, that phone's not dead. This is all a pack of lies. So in other words, don't rely on the crooks guiding you to do exactly what they want. And of course, the most important part of doubling up is that doubling up your authentication by having that second factor. That means that it's much harder for the crooks to get into your email, and even harder for them to stay inside it for the time they need to pull this sort of thing off. And the second thing is, please, inside your business, particularly if you work in accounts receivable or accounts payable, if you see something, say something. A lot of these attacks, particularly if they do start with phishing, the crooks don't know whose email account they're going to be able to compromise up front, or they don't know exactly which account is going to be their way into the system. So they might try the same social engineering trick on person after person after person, and once they get one of them, then they're kind of in. So it could be that for the crooks to be able to get into your email system in the first place, they might only get in on the 6th attempt. So if any of the first 5 people had reported what was going on, the 6th person would have known to be warier. So that's really important. And the last rule I would say is, and this is really, really important if you are a CEO or the CFO, the guys whose email accounts and phone numbers the crooks most want to get hold of, no free passes. We often see the case, oh, I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO, I don't have time for 2FA, I'm a busy person. You need to make an exception because I'm traveling the world, I'm doing mergers and acquisitions, I'm buying this company, I'm doing these deals, I don't need people getting in my way. The point is, if you allow yourself to be rushed, if you're the way or the big important fella at the top, then you can't really be very cross if the same thing happens to your staff. So if there's a rule that makes it harder for the crooks with a little bit more inconvenience for all of your staff, it has to apply to everybody, no exceptions. Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic advice. So as always, comment your questions below and we'll answer them after the video has ended. This is a fascinating topic, so I'm sure there will be more to come on this. Yeah, just as a word of warning, my understanding is in 2018, the FBI reported, the internet-enabled crime reported to them came to something like 2.7 billion, that's 1,000 million US dollars, and 1.2 billion of that, that's just about 45%, was actually money got in large lumps through business email compromise. So be careful out there, folks. Definitely. Cool, well thank you for joining us as always, and we'll see you next week. Bye guys.